These are real facts. They cover her body. 7,000 years ago. His soul was lost in 1832 at the age of 42, after he had reached the highest scientific ranks in Egyptology. Until now, knowledge has not arrived. How did this happen? Present to you, one of the descendants of the Pharaohs, Gamil el Shorbagy. Secrets of the Pharaohs.
Among the wonders and curiosities that we could not find an explanation for except the reincarnation of souls. The story of Dorothy Louise Eddy, or Mother City, who was called the guardian of the temple and the mistress of the pharaoh. In a suburb of South London, on January 16, 1904, a beautiful girl named Dorothy Louise was born to parents of Irish descent, and life goes on quietly. And fall into a coma. The family doctor said that Dorothy had died, and he requested that the girl be shrouded and prepared for burial. Amidst the shock of the parents, Dorothy recovered from her coma normally and in good condition. She begins to give descriptions of her alleged home. The parents did not know that this incident would change the course of their daughter's life, to turn from the English citizen Dorothy Eddy into the discoverer of the Egyptian antiquities, Seti, who spent her life in Egypt among the tombs and temples and was buried next to her lover, King Seti I, in the buried godmother in the Albalina Center in Sohag Governorate. A year after the incident, her father takes her on a trip to the British Museum, and as soon as she sees the pharaonic statues, the little girl's condition changes, and she begins to revolve around the statues, kisses her feet, and screams patriotism amid the astonishment of the father and the museum visitors, which prompted her father to remove her from the museum so as not to arouse the concern of the visitors. When she reached the age of 10, she caught the eye of the famous English archaeologist Shorbagy, who noticed her intense passion for Egyptian antiquities. Shorbagy volunteered to teach Dorothy the hieroglyphic language, so he was surprised by the speed of her learning, and when he asked her about that, she said, she only remembers what she learned before. She was still insisting that she was coming from that distant time, and that in her previous life she was part of the court of the pharaonic king Seti I, and told him the dream she had when Seti I came to her in her sleep and asked her to read. By the year 1927, the family moved to London, which encouraged Dorothy to satisfy her craving and love for studying Egyptology, so she joined an art school and specialized in ancient art. During that, she gets to know an Egyptian young man who came to study called Imam Abdul Majid, and the relationship between them becomes stronger, and after 3 years she gets married and has children. Her only child, whom she decided to name Seti. In 1933, she visits Egypt for the first time, accompanied by her husband, and as soon as she goes down to the port of Port Said, she bows down towards the ground and wets the dock with her tears. With him because all the sources that I talked about did not mention the child again. In the incomplete autobiography that Dorothy wrote in 1972, she told of the visits of the god Horare to her in her dreams, and that he told her that she was an Egyptian girl named Bentrashit, for a father working in the soldiers' corps, and for a mother working as a vegetable seller during the reign of King Seti I, 1290 to 1279 BC. Dorothy continues that after the death of her mother, the father could not bear the hardship of raising her, so he gave her to the temple of Abydos, to work as a priestess in the service of God, and the girl grows up and becomes one of the priestesses of the temple. Because of her intense love for the king and her fear for his political future from the scandal of his illegal relationship with one of the priestesses of the temple, she commits suicide, and according to what the sources mentioned, that story was the reason for her moving in the last part of her life to Abydos and the reason for calling her Mother City. After the divorce, Dorothy moved to live in the Nazlet El Semen area, near the pyramids of Giza. She drew, recorded, and wrote, and added to that she used to perform rituals similar to prayers in front of the pyramids. He heard about her during that period, the well-known archaeologist Dr. Salim Hassan, 1868 to 1961, who was excavating in the Giza area, so he hosted her in the Giza Antiquities area and hired her as a painter in his archaeological team. Through her work, Dorothy participated in some of the drawings of the large encyclopedia written by Hassan under the name of the Encyclopedia of Ancient Egypt, and thus she was the first woman in Egypt to work in the Egyptian Antiquities Authority. In 1956, she decided to fulfill the call of her soul to go to the south of Egypt, specifically to the buried godmother, the village of Abydos. As soon as she arrives, she tells the antiquities inspectors that this is her house. Of course, the inspectors did not believe her, so she showed them some newly discovered inscriptions that had not been translated, so she translated them for them, which surprised the inspectors, so they called her the eccentric lady. The matter did not stop at astonishment only, but Dorothy faced the rejection of her presence from the women of the village, who feared the effect of her beauty on their husbands, which prompted her to be stoned by the people, and with every time she insisted that she was in her homeland and her home. In the end, one of the large families in the village decides to take care of her and allocate a child to guard her. Thanks to the mediation of Dr. Salim Hassan, she gets a job in the Abydos temple, and Dorothy is known as Seti. During her work in Abydos, she succeeds in translating many hieroglyphic texts in the temple. She also discovers the temple garden, and restores large parts of it, and due to her efforts, the Antiquities Authority decides to extend her service until after retirement. Seti lived 25 years in Abydos and was famous for her interest in rooting the folk and heritage customs of the people, and linking them to ancient Egyptian history, which she documented in a set of articles she wrote between the years 60 and 75, which was republished by Egyptologist Nicola Hansen in 2008. After her official retirement in '69, the Antiquities Authority continued to use her from time to time, and she was allowed to guide tourists, and she was also doing some handicrafts that were accepted by tourists. She was on good terms with the Queen of Britain and Abdel Nasser, and she supported him and Egypt. Seti gained international fame, and tourist delegations came to visit her specially. Seti died on April 21, 1981 AD. And was buried in her cemetery, which she prepared for herself before her death, and which she made sure to be far from the cemeteries of Muslims and Christians, but close to her ancient Egyptian people. See you soon. Gamil el Shorba.